Hi guys, I'm Brad Montgomery and welcome to The Breakdown, and here we talk about science, psychology, and investing. Today we're going to be talking about the local wildlife across the borderland. Before we get started, if you missed any of our episodes, you can always head over to kfoxtv.com/community/the-breakdown. Now let's break it down. And I'm here with Lois Ballin with Texas Parks and Wildlife, or Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. We're going to be talking about today the native animals and wildlife that we can come across here in the borderland. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that I want to talk about as far as what we can see here. And we'll get into some exciting things that have happened here occasionally over the year with some things that have been seen and cited. But what types of animal life in general can we expect to find in kind of our part of the Southwest or the Chihuahuan Desert, including the Franklins?
Yes. Well, that's a multifaceted question because we have 60 species of mammals, about 300, 400 species of birds, and quite an array of reptile species, with a few amphibians thrown in there. So we have a lot of wildlife. Yeah. And if you want me to talk about specific groups, I can. Or
let's start with some of the larger maybe animals that we might see in the Franklins, for example, that might surprise people, or maybe people already know.
Okay. Well, there's three that I can think of. We have the mule deer, which are a little bit bigger than white-tailed deer. Okay. And they also, they have bigger ears and they have black on their tail. There's a lot of differences. And then we have javelina. Javelina are fairly newcomers. We believe they came in on the river from Las Cruces, from their bosque there. And the other large animal that's really transient, mostly traveling through the Franklins, going somewhere else, is the mountain lion.
Okay. So they don't, that's interesting. So I had heard, I remember it was years ago, where they had tranquilized one in downtown. It was a dry year that year, and it had come out of the mountains. And the interesting thing about that is it was actually walking through downtown, and nobody realized it. They thought it was a dog. And so people were walking right past it. And finally somebody realized that animal control got involved. But it's interesting that you say that they're mostly transient. And the reason I bring that up is because I thought they actually lived in the Franklins. You're saying they mostly just passed through our area?
At this time, that's what we're seeing. Now, in the past, I'm sure we had at least one resident, maybe two, but we have trail cameras out all over the Franklins, and we're just seeing a few tracks here and there. We haven't picked up any lions so far. So we think that at this point in time, they're probably just moving through. The younger ones have to find a new territory for themselves. Right. So that's probably what they're doing.
And do they... I guess it's really random. They're all throughout the West, right?
Oh, yeah.
And you hear about reports of them attacking, but it's very infrequent. Even when you take into full states like Colorado and Wyoming, and, I had heard that if they do get aggressive, it's going to be, chances are they're going to look at like a child or something smaller. Is that like a full-grown adult? If you're going to be hiking in the mountains, much less likely to run into any kind of problems. Is that?
Yeah, that's true. There's so much urbanization going on in our natural habitats now. We didn't used to see urban mountain lions, but there's so much of their habitat that's been urbanized. They really have to impinge on our habitat because they have no place to go. Yes, they would go for the easy prey if they were going to go. However, if you're on a bicycle alone at dawn or dusk or at night, you should never do that. You should never be alone. You should never run alone during those periods of time, dawn and dusk, and during the night, because it is possible a hungry mountain lion may chase you down. But we have a whole protocol of what we tell people how to protect themselves from that.
Okay, what are the best practices?
So the best thing to know about mountain lion attack is to fight back. Throw rocks, throw sticks, yell at them, make yourself big, and if need be, if you have a pocket knife or some kind of weapon, you need to fight.
Okay. if you need to fight harder than they are to make them think it's not worth it.
Right,
Leave
right.
me alone. Okay. Now you mentioned the mule deer, but you also mentioned the white-tailed deer. Do we have both?
And then what we call the Trans-Pecos, which is everything west of the Pecos River, which is basically West Texas. We do.
Okay.
But they're on the mountain islands, in areas like, Fort Davis, the Alpine area,
Guadalupe
Brewster County, right. So they're much smaller. Our race of white-tailed deer are called Coues white-tailed deer, and they're smaller than the other white-tailed deer that you see in the rest of Texas.
Interesting. Okay. And I guess the mule deer, since we're on the larger animals, I guess they're the ones that we've seen in the neighborhoods, right? You can see, and I saw a very large one actually coming down Wrestler by Albertsons. And I thought, man, if there was somebody jogging, they would have been in trouble, because, I mean, this thing was huge, and it was running along the sidewalk. I was coming home on down one of these streets by Thunderbird, and it had rained a little bit one night. I was driving back from some classes that I'd taken, and I wasn't expecting it. And there was a little park over there, and I was coming down, and these these big deer, and their hooves were sliding a little bit because the street was just wet enough. And I remember I made that right turn, and I thought I was going to hit one of them. But it was like 11 o'clock at night, and it really scared me. And I slowed down, and I didn't, and they were fine, but it scared me to death. And I guess you see the signs occasionally in parts of West El Paso. You need to be a little, I don't know, it's not like it happens all the time, but I guess you kind of need to have it in the back of your mind that, hey, be on the alert for deer. And I would ask, my experience with that kind of close call was around 11 o'clock at night. When are the times when they're out, or when it's more likely that you might have to or want to be on the lookout for them?
Well, almost all the desert animals follow the same routine.
Okay.
Where they're out the coolest parts of the day, to graze or to hunt, whether they're predator or prey. So those are like dawn and dusk and at night. However, mule deer are showing up extensively in the daytime here. Kind of the same situation with the lions, urbanization's forcing them into the city, and it's drought. We have such a drought. So people plant non-native lush grass and lots of ornamental flowers that take tons of water, and they can't resist that.
Yep. It's like a salad bar.
Right. And so we have good populations in northeast El Paso by the mountain. We also have the west side, but they're also dispersing, through the city sometimes. And they're really harmless unless the bucks are in what we call the rut, the breeding season, and then they could be dangerous. But basically, they're going to run, if they see you.
Yeah. So they kind of like the areas where wildlife kind of runs up into the neighborhoods, so they can kind of have the best of both worlds. They can get back into the open areas when they feel threatened, but they can also get some of that good plant life when they get hungrier.
Right. They follow the arroyos.
Oh, okay.
So that's what they do. They come down through the arroyos. And then if somebody's got a lot of lush plants, they're going to make their way over there.
Check it out.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay. And are there any bobcat sightings, so as we start to get like a little bit smaller in size, I think I've heard in parts of the Southwest, and this is one thing I wanted to actually ask you specifically, there have been maybe some sightings of jaguars, maybe in southern Arizona. There have been some, but nothing like that around here, right?
Well, the entire Southwest spent about 50 years trying to eliminate all the predators, which is why the Mexican wolf became endangered and the jaguar became endangered. So we haven't seen a jaguar in Texas in ages, but in southeastern Arizona, there's a couple breaks in the border fence that they're getting through in Mexico. And they're hanging out in a lot of the mountain ranges there, and people have them on their trail cameras. I think there's only one, but there's a project in Tucson called the Northern Jaguar Project, and they do a lot of work with jaguars.
So if they do, it'll be kind of like the northern Mexico where they kind of try to repopulate That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
And you mentioned wolves, so and then I want to get to actually foxes as well, but I guess wolves are mostly probably in the Sky Islands, the higher elevation, the forested mountains, or are they down through the desert as well?
Well, they used to be.
Okay.
The subspecies that we used to have called the Mexican wolf is much smaller than the regular timber wolf or the gray wolf that you find in Minnesota and Montana and Wyoming. Is a much smaller wolf. But again, there's been an effort to reintroduce them into areas in the mountains in New Mexico and Arizona, and they've had a lot of difficulty. It's still a big fight with ranchers.
Yep, I've seen that.
And so it's a tough situation. I mean, there are a lot of us that really hope we can get them back.
Don't want them back.
Right.
Yeah, that is tough, and that's been a battle for a long time. I got some relatives in Montana, and I periodically hear about that. What about foxes? How many different kinds of foxes do we have? Because I think there's the gray, which are a little bit smaller, and then do we have red as well? No. Okay.
They're throughout Texas, but not in our range.
Okay.
So we have mainly the gray fox, which is practically ubiquitous in this region. Not afraid of humans at all. They populate all the arroyos. People see them all the time. They'll sit on your wall and eat your figs that hit the ground.
Oh, yeah.
They're not afraid of us at all, which is a problem with urban wildlife. We want them to be afraid of us. We don't want them to get too close. They lose their fear, and then sometimes you can have problems with that.
Yeah.
So, and we do have bobcats, by the way.
Okay.
You asked about bobcat.
Bobcats. So, and how big are bobcats? I know they're a little bit larger than you. I know some house cats actually can get pretty big, but it's kind of amazing some of these pictures. And I actually knew someone that had a very big house cat, but I guess they're smaller than a mountain lion, right? But in generally larger than your average house cat.
In general, yeah. I mean, they're way smaller than a mountain lion. Mountain lion is from head to tail could be 8 feet or more even. Depending on whether it's a male or a female, and also they've got much longer legs. So the bobcat has various lengths of the tail depending on the region it's living in. It can be really small, it can be longer, but they're lower to the ground. They have ear tufts and white spots on their behind their
I think
ears.
I've seen their footprints.
And they're very variable in the amount of coloring that they have. And again, that's a regional thing.
Okay.
Ours are pretty spotted and beautiful.
Do they don't really pose any kind of threat to us, right? They're
No.
just very timid. Do they have issues with the mountain lions, or do they just kind of give them their, let them pass through and kind of stay out of the way? Or, I mean, I guess because mountain lions demand larger territory, I would imagine, so there's fewer mountain lions, so they don't really cross paths very often.
They can,
Okay.
but the mountain lion's favorite food is mule deer.
Oh, okay.
They're always going to go for the mule deer first, and second on the menu would be the javelina.
Okay.
So odds of them taking a bobcat or any other what we call mesomammal, the mid-sized mammals, is pretty low.
Okay. Just not, they want the bigger.
But I have seen a bobcat take a deer.
Really? That's wow. Did that surprise you guys? Was that?
It did me because I had never heard of it, but other people in Texas have heard of that. So
Wow, that is interesting. Now, as far as I kind of want to shift over to, well, I do want to touch on this really quickly before we shift over to birds. Javelina. So I'd heard about them areas just east of here, for quite a while, and there's a lot of hunting done on them, et cetera. You really didn't hear about them through here. And forever. So how recent has this development been where it's looking like they may be here now?
Oh, they're here.
But they are here.
They're here to stay.
And are they on the river? Is it mostly?
No. Again, they come down the mountain through the arroyos. They're all over Casner Range. They're walking down to the archaeology museum and drinking there. they'll even come down the arroyos in Mountain Park in Northeast El Paso. And I'm not sure about the west side. I haven't heard about sightings on the west side. But it's been, I think, slowly building up for maybe 10 years. Wow, okay. But prior to that, we never saw howling in here. It's very rare. So they've moved in.
And are there any issues that come along with them as far as like disease or just, potential overpopulation or, population growth that's too rapid, or are we just kind of accepting that they're here in the U.S. and they're not going anywhere and
Well, they are native.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I didn't realize
Oh,
that.
yeah, they're a native animal. You may be thinking of the non-native hogs that are huge, the wild boar, that are a huge problem in Texas and elsewhere.
So these are different. These are...
Yeah, and, they have a bad reputation when they have their young of being pretty fierce and maybe even attacking, but I've worked around them a lot.
Okay.
And I never had a problem. And, of course, you just have to be smart. You see a pack of animals and you just back away slowly. And usually that turns out pretty good.
Yeah, it's usually the best approach for sure, especially if you see young, but even not. So bear, are they just Gila and Sacramento mountains? And it would be black bear, correct? And
right.
But they don't venture down into the desert. Like they're not interested in the lower elevations.
In the 25 years I've been here, we had one bear. And we're not sure where he came from. We figure he came from the Sacramentos. It was a subadult. So it's kind of the same thing with the mountain lions. They have to leave.
To find territory.
Right, and find their own territory. So he was passing through El Paso, and a dog treated him.
Really?
Yeah, in a tree in the middle of El Paso.
Wow, that would be... I don't want to see a bear here.
Right, and so the game wardens put him in a trap and translocated him to the alpine area. Okay. But that's the only knowledge I have of black bear. But they're all over the mountains in the southwest.
So if you go hiking, just kind of be aware. I've seen back east, you see these videos out of New Jersey and stuff where these people, there was this one I saw where the guy was on a bike on these bike trails. And they fly down these bike trails, these bikers. And he was going at a pretty good clip, and he looks back, and there was this bear just going right after him. I mean, he was like, whoa. He took off even faster, and the bear finally relented, but that really gave him something to ride for. That really pushed his...
That's not very common.
No.
What is common, though, is the best way to protect yourself in bear country is do not carry any chocolate.
Okay.
The bear has a real sweet tooth, just like Pooh the bear.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's really true.
Okay.
I have a sweet tooth. So take advantage of, in the campgrounds, they usually have places where you can store your food that are bear proof, or hang them from high trees. And when you're out there, try to make noise. Don't surprise them. So you could put bells on your hiking stick if you're alone, or if you're with other people, just chat, Yeah. Just don't surprise them.
Yeah. I could see, yeah. There was another video I'd seen just quickly on the bear thing, just so you're aware, hiking in the Gilas or the Sacramentos, or just being in there fishing or in general in the mountainous areas here. They would just come through people's yards and people wouldn't expect it. Next thing you know, and they would run in the house. There was a video of this lady, she was doing something on her porch, and all of a sudden one's coming through her yard, and she zips in the house and she calls her husband. I mean, that would be kind of a shocker to see that. So lower elevation is literally one sighting.
Well, that's here.
Here.
Now, towards Big Bend, on the way to Big Bend, we have a couple of wildlife management areas, and the black bear is still pretty good populations in Mexico. Okay. And on their own, with no influence on our part to reintroduce them, they've come back. So they're crossing the border, these Mexican black bears, and they are in the desert areas by the Big Bend National Park, in Big Bend National Park, and the state park in one of our WMAs. And it's very interesting because their diet, of course, is completely different, and they're eating yuccas and sotals and all this desert food.
Yeah.
So yes, they will occur in the desert.
That is kind of interesting, though, because and almost lucky for the Southwest in the sense that that part of northern Mexico was never really populated. You know, it was even that part of Texas, that Big Bend area, was never really populated. So if you drive species out, you know, that whole northern Mexico area, they can just kind of come back over time, which is interesting.
Well, a lot of our biologists have been, and other biologists have been working with Mexican ranchers for a very long time to become tolerant of the bears. And they have agreements and this and that. And so there's been a lot of work to help, you know, save the black bear.
Right, get education.
Right.
That's good. Now, I want to talk about birds.
Birds.
Because, and there's some, I remember I was really surprised to see, I was surprised or not as surprised now as time's gone along, but there are some pretty colorful birds that make it into the Southwest from Mexico, into Arizona. Do we have any like transient kind of parrot type or that have ever been seen here that have come up from the South? Or are we too far up in elevation, too far in elevation and too far kind of center of the continent for any of those kind of tropical birds to kind of bleed into our area? I think Orioles are here from time to time. Are they or are they not?
We have a lot of Orioles.
We do.
Some are migrant, some are resident. But
And those are beautiful.
for your first question about the parrots, we actually have parrots here.
Do we?
We do. Nobody knows where they came from. The best guess is that somebody bought them. They were pets. They decided they didn't want them anymore, and they turned them loose. And enough of them turned loose that they are breeding. So in the Upper Valley, around the Country Club area,
Yeah.
and Sunset, there are flocks of red-crowned parrots and lilac-crowned parrots.
I can't believe that. That's amazing.
And the latest introduction that we don't really know how they got here either are the monk parakeets.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
So I saw them first at Rio Bosque. I don't know where else they're hanging out, but so we do have 3 species of parrot-like birds here. But as far as like the
Native.
real specialty birds like the elegant trogon that people come from all over the world to see in southeastern Arizona mountains, they don't come here. They specifically use sycamore trees and riparian habitats, and we don't have any of that.
That's true. The Arizona, I've seen the sycamore and the
But we do have we have all kinds of birds. We have resident birds. We have birds that migrate here to breed in the summer. We have birds that migrate here to spend the winter. And we have birds that are just passing through on their way somewhere else.
Yeah.
So
Canadian geese are one of those, right?
Canadian geese are one of those. However, the Canadian geese that landed at Ascardi Park found that they had a real cushy
So
situation.
they stayed.
So they never left.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're reproducing like crazy, which is, kind of a problem for the park. So if they find an area they like, they'll migrate.
Yeah. And our winters aren't that terrible.
No,
So,
yeah.
That's interesting. And as far as Orioles, is it just one species? They're the ones that make the woven nest.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
Is it just the one species that?
We have a lot of hooded orioles. We have occasionally the Bullock's oriole that comes through. We have Scott's oriole. Those are the 3 most common orioles that you're going to see here. And the Scott's really likes the desert.
Okay.
So it's a good place to look for them in the desert. But they're mostly migratory.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, there's a lot of other species of orioles, but that's pretty much what comes through El Paso.
And now moving from the more colorful to the larger, are there any, what are the bigger birds that can be seen here that kind of would surprise some people from the predatory to the non? Like, are there any species of turkey that are native around here? No? Okay.
Yeah.
And so I guess bald eagle can be seen through here from time to time?
Occasionally.
Okay.
Occasionally, not common, bald eagles will show up. Golden eagles used to be much more common here. They would hang out on the old transformer lines on Stan Robert,
Okay.
and then they tore them all down and put up these metal things.
Yeah.
And and they left. But I have seen them occasionally at Waco tanks soaring around. So that would be our biggest bird. Turkey vultures are here,
They're all over.
and they're quite large.
They are.
Yeah.
I see them when I was hiking. They like that east side of the Franklins. I don't know if because nobody can really get there. So when you hike all the way up to like South Franklin Mountain and you look down that death cliff pretty much, sometimes I would see him soaring down there. But I've seen him in the Aurora. I've seen him so close where they look at you. I mean, I've seen actually on the east side, it's really bizarre. Every now and then in the afternoon, evening, I would see these like 50 or 60 of them. I mean,
Right.
just way up there, just churning around. And I'm like, I don't know if they have parties or what it's called when they all get together.
That's called a kettle when they do that. And they're taking advantage of the thermals.
Okay.
So they'll ride the thermals up, and then they have these incredibly huge wings, and they'll just soar for miles and miles and miles till they hit the next one. And they cooperatively feed.
Okay.
So if they find a dead animal, they'll all come down and share in it. So
Every now and then you see that too. Every now and then you'll see kind of them all start to go down. And I don't want to say they're not like a hawk when they do it, but they'll get down pretty quick if they find something that, or maybe they see all of a sudden you'll see one and then you'll see another one and then they'll all start to kind of
they're very elegant flyers.
Yeah.
If you appreciate their flight, it's magnificent. But we have a lot of hawks. Our most common hawks are red-tailed hawks, and their population used to like triple in the winter, but not so much anymore. And then we have Swainson's hawks, which migrate from South America and breed in our region. And then occasionally we get other really nice hawks, but they're, very uncommon.
I think, is it Swenson's hawk like the size of a Cooper's hawk, like a little bit smaller?
No, bigger.
Bigger. Okay.
Yeah,
That may
and
have been the one that I saw when I was talking about kind of wrestler.
Yeah.
It was not as big as a red tail. I think they're a little bit smaller than a red tail. Or are they about the same?
I think they are a little smaller.
A little smaller.
They're not chunky like a red tail. It's kind of like a linebacker hawk, and the Swainsons are more elegant and slender. Oh, I forgot Harris's hawk.
Okay.
We used to have Harris's hawks in large amounts, and I'm not seeing much of those anymore either. So actually, the bird populations are really concerned, all the scientists now, because they're all crashing in numbers.
Is it with the climate change? Is that
Climate change is a big part of it. Urbanization is another part. The migrating birds, some of them don't stop till they get to their destination, but most of them have to stop and refuel and rest. And those are called stopover habitats. And they're being urbanized. So where they used to stop and rest, it's not there anymore. So again, urbanization, habitat fragmentation, climate change, a big one. The territories, the residency status of a lot of these birds is changing.
to try to adjust. Really quickly, one last question on the birds. I know a lot of places, it's kind of a cool thing when the cranes come through.
Oh, yeah.
But we don't get them. Do we have any here, whooping cranes or any?
No. Well, whooping crane, we had one once at Bosque del Apache in New Mexico.
Okay.
But most of the cranes are coming for the winter.
Okay.
And they go to wetlands because that gives them safety from coyotes, their main predator. So Bosque del Apache is a great place. All those wetlands in New Mexico north of Bosque del Apache. And if you go toward Tucson, there's some wetlands out there.
Safford, or is it?
Close to Wilcox.
Oh, Wilcox. Okay.
Yeah, I can't remember the names of them.
Okay.
But if you listen and you're just in your backyard pulling weeds or whatever, you'll hear them fly over.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
A very unique trumpeting sound. They have really winding vocal cords, that windpipe that makes that wonderful sound.
Interesting.
So, and if you look up, you may see them.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Lois. Now, I want to ask you really quickly, too, because we like to give this information out. Where can people go to find information about more of the wildlife that they may encounter here in the borderland?
Right. We have a wonderful local chapter of Audubon.
Okay.
It's the Trans-Pecos chapter of Audubon Society. They have a good web page. They have field trips. They have lectures. They have bird lists. So that is the best place to go for birds. The other animals, UTEP has a wonderful site on their web page with lists all kinds of checklists of mammals, butterflies, larval host plants for the larvae of butterflies, insects, you name it.
Everything that's been seen.
Yeah, it's the LEB, Learning Environmental Biology page.
Okay.
And so you can look at those lists and you'll know what we find here.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Well, thank you very much, Lois Baldwin from Texas Wildlife Department, Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. We're going to have you back because next time when we're on, we're going to be talking about some of the non-native species in the borderland. Thank you very much for joining us again.
You're welcome.
If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to comment, subscribe, and share it with your friends. You can check out our past archive of episodes on kfoxtv.com or listen on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much for breaking it down with me, and we'll see you next time here on The Breakdown.